The script tag is the primary method to insert JavaScript into the HTML page. The script tag has 6 attributes that are often underutilized and misunderstood by most JavaScript developers. Further, we are going to look at the ways to use the script tag and the importance and use of each of the attributes of the script tag. So without further ado, let's get started. If you are an experienced JavaScript developer and just interested in knowing how the script tag attributes work, please feel free to jump to the relevant section. The description below has timestamps to different sections. Please feel free to choose the one you want to watch. The script tag is the primary method to insert JavaScript into HTML. The script tag was created by Netscape and was first implemented in Netscape Navigator 2. There are 2 ways you can use the script tag to insert JavaScript in HTML. The first method is the inline method, using which you can insert JavaScript directly into the HTML file. Here is an example of how you would do that using the script tag. I will go ahead and start with the script tag. Between the script tag, I will create a hello world function that prints the text hello world to the console. On the next line, I will go ahead and invoke this function. This is the simplest way to include the JavaScript in your HTML page, but not the optimal way of doing it. This approach is good for short scripts and scripts which are page specific. One more thing you need to remember about inline JavaScript is that it cannot be loaded asynchronously or deferred. We'll have a detailed look into that in the latter part of the video. Inline JavaScript is hence render blocking. This means that the browser will parse and execute inline JavaScript from top to bottom before moving to the next line of code. Hence, it's always better to include the inline JavaScript in the page footer once you have loaded your HTML and CSS. Another way of inserting JavaScript into your HTML files is by using the external JavaScript file. This is the most commonly used method to insert JavaScript files into your HTML. Let's have a look at an example. Assuming this is how files are organized in my project, where I have the index.html file and the main.js file all in the same project folder. This is how we can insert the main.js file into the index.html file. First, I will declare the script tag, and then in the script tag, we will include an attribute called the src. The src attribute points to the JavaScript file that we want to include in the script tag. It's as simple as that. The main.js file is now included in your HTML. There is often much confusion between the attributes of script tag. The confusion is especially centered around 2 attributes, defer and async. But let's look at all the script tag attributes one by one and understand how they impact how the browser treats and loads external JavaScript files. The type attribute indicates the content type, also known as the MIME type of the scripting language used in the external file that you're trying to include in your HTML. This is how you would include a type attribute in your script tag. Traditionally, the default type has always been text JavaScript, although this has been deprecated now, but is still used by many developers. Current default is the application JavaScript or application ECMAScript. The safest option is to use these default options, else using a different MIME type that is not supported by your browser ends up in the script being completely ignored by the browser. Web pages often make requests to load resources on the other servers. Here's where Crossorigin resource sharing, often abbreviated as CORS, comes in. A Crossorigin request is a request for a resource, for example, style sheets, iframes, images, fonts, or scripts from another domain. CORS is used to manage these kind of cross-origin requests. It defines a way how a browser and a server can interact to determine whether it is safe to allow the cross-origin requests or not. CORS allows servers to specify who can access the assets on the server, amongst many other things. Here is an example of how you can use the Crossorigin attribute. So having defined the Crossorigin attribute, there are two possible options that we can pass to it. The first one being anonymous option. In this case, a Crossorigin request is performed and no credentials are sent. The anonymous request is often used with the integrity attribute, which sends a hash and the receiving server verifies the request. We will look into this in more detail in the next attribute. The next possible option of Crossorigin attribute is use credentials. In this case, a Crossorigin request is performed and the credentials can be sent along with the request. The credentials can be in the form of a cookie, a certificate, an HTTP authentication, etc. Most of the time, you would be using the anonymous option, but it's always good to know that an option to send the credentials exists as well. The integrity attribute allows a browser to check the fetched script to ensure that the code is never loaded if the source has been manipulated. I'll pull an example of the Bootstrap CDN code we often use to insert JavaScript into our HTML. If you look at this code closely, it uses a Crossorigin of anonymous, and then there is an integrity attribute which has something known as the SRI hash. The SRI stands for Sub-Resource Integrity and is a W3C specification that allows web developers to ensure that the resource hosted on the third-party servers have not been altered. So this means that the Bootstrap JavaScript being served on your page is as it was uploaded by the Bootstrap team and has not been altered. The use of SRIs is highly recommended whenever you're using CORS. To use the async attribute, all you need to do is include the attribute in your script tag. Please note that the async attribute works only with the external JavaScript files and not for the internal JavaScript. The async attribute indicates the browser that the script should start downloading immediately and should not block the rest of the page's rendering. The JavaScript, however, is executed asynchronously with the rest of the page. The async method does not wait for the rest of the DOM to complete loading before the JavaScript is executed. This is a non-render blocking way of loading your JavaScript files. Now, using the defer attribute is as simple as using the async attribute. All you need to do is include the defer attribute in your JavaScript tag. When using the defer attribute, the script execution is deferred until after all the document contents have been loaded completely. However, the script starts downloading immediately, but it's not executed until all the contents of the document have been loaded and are ready. In case you're neither including the async or the defer attribute in your script tag, your script becomes render blocking. This means that the browser will first parse and execute the script before it moves to the next line of code in your HTML. This means that browser will first parse and execute the JavaScript before it moves to the next line of code in your HTML. This impacts the loading of the speed of your web page. So it's important to include either the async or the defer attributes while including JavaScript files in your HTML. Which one you're going to use is actually going to depend on the situation. I hope this was insightful. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, peace.